Today we are talking to immigration lawyers based here in the US. We just finished speaking to Naima Said, based in Maryland. And I'm privileged to be joined again with one of our leading immigration lawyers, Mr. Japheth Matemu. He's based in Washington, D.C. area. He practices law in the major states, mostly in New York and generally just nationwide. Matemu, we are talking about the election of Mr. Donald Trump as the president of the US, taking over from Barack Obama, and what that means to the immigration community, especially Kenyans living here, immigrants.
Okay, thank you very much. First, the election of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is still the president-elect. He's the president-elect, he's not yet president. And I do not think it is useful right now to start trying to predict what he's going to do, because we know Donald Trump doesn't have a track record of being predictable. And that unpredictability basically might actually turn out to be, an advantage to the immigrants, because he has not been very respectful of the general, doctrine of the Republican Party, or he has not been strongly attached to any policy line of either the Democrats or the Republicans. We really don't know. Okay, so for now, I think the first thing we should do, first of all, is we need to wait and see what happens after the inauguration. He's still trying to form his cabinet. He's still trying to fill different government positions. He's still trying to formulate a policy. And we need to also be aware that this campaign rhetoric might not transform into policy, because there's a lot of hyperbole that is associated with the election campaigns and the electioneering period, and we need to be careful that we do not take those to be policy positions. We have to wait. And
there's so many things are flying around, but there's no doubt the fact that Kenyans, especially those ones living here in the US, and apparently back at home, now live in fear. We had a story in one of the dailies in Kenya that 30,000 Kenyans will be deported by January. Is there credibility to such kind of allegations?
No, that fear is unfounded. First of all, you need to understand this, that the United States is a constitutional democracy. This is a country of laws. The president does not have such powers as to be able to order the deportation of 30,000 Kenyans or anything like that. Let's look at the practical aspect of this. First of all, right now, immigration courts are congested to the brim. Some individuals do not have deportation or removal hearings for several years. I've seen that even the calendars for this coming year are full, up to like, I received last week some dates. Some clients don't have hearing dates up to 2019. So if you suddenly put all these people in removal proceedings, it will break the system. We don't have enough judges. We don't have enough counsels, government attorneys to prosecute these cases. And the trial is not a one-day affair. By the time an order of removal is issued, somebody has been to court 4 or 5 times, sometimes even 10 times. We have cases that are pending since 2007. So for that to happen, there has to be so many other things have to be done. And it is just not practical that we can have so many deportations occurring. Now, if the president had so much power, as the people are claiming that, like Trump can deport 30,000 Kenyans, then Obama would have been able to change all immigration laws and, and be able to execute his policies the way he wanted them. You see, he was blocked by the district courts in Texas. He was blocked by the Fifth Circuit. The case went to the Supreme Court, and some of Obama's policies, trying to protect the parents of certain immigrant children, stopped in their tracks. So if the president had that much power, Obama would have let a lot of people stay here without papers. It's impractical to deport so many people at once. That is not within the president's power to do.
Of course, recently, Trump, in his characteristic way of doing things, he reversed and said now that instead of deporting the 12 million plus, now he's going to go for the criminals between 2,000 and 3,000 immediately, the first week he takes over. Is that also visible? And how is that going to look different from what the Obama administration has done?
First of all, Trump is not proposing anything different from what Obama is doing. Obama is doing just that. Violent criminals and gang members are the ones that are being prosecuted as a matter of priority for national security reasons. So that is not different. Okay.
I speak briefly about the so-called sanctuary cities. I've heard so many people calling and saying that they're considering moving away from those southern states to places like New York or Chicago, where they feel a little more safer because of the sanctuary cities. What is sanctuary cities, and what does it offer to Kenyans who have issues with immigration?
Okay, sanctuary cities, basically, that is just a term of art. Sanctuary cities just mean there's some cities and states that have, as a matter of policy, decided that they will not cooperate with the federal government in terms of informing the federal government of people who might be living in this country unlawfully within their jurisdictions. It's just that. So you realize immigration law is federal law. It is administered by the federal government. But all states have their own local governments. And all cities within those states and all authorities within those states also administer their own laws. The federal government cannot force, for example, a policeman in Chicago to go arrest somebody who is here unlawfully. No. What they do, they can request and say, you know something, we know that you have arrested a certain person, is in your jail, we suspect that that person is here unlawfully. Could you please hold him for us so that we can come and pick him up and decide if we're going to put them in removal proceedings? The federal government can not order the states or cities, or, to help the federal government enforce its own immigration laws. So any city or state can refuse to cooperate with the federal government. Now, one of the most common ways by which people get in removal proceedings or deportation proceedings is somebody is arrested for something entirely different. I'll give you an example. Somebody can be arrested because on the road for driving without a license or for driving while under the influence of alcohol or something like that. Now, when they are detained pursuant to criminal charges that have been brought by a state or by a city, then the city or the state informs the federal government. If they believe that the person they have in their custody is not here lawfully, then they inform. So we do have certain agreements between the federal government and certain states or cities, actually states, to inform the federal government if they have somebody who they believe is not a citizen. Now, what Donald Trump was saying that he was going to do to deal with sanctuary cities, he was going to use the power of the federal government to limit funding or take away funding for certain programs that the federal government funds in cities and states. But that is going to be very difficult for Trump to do. It's almost impossible to do that. For you to take away funding from a city because they have failed to cooperate with the federal government, the Supreme Court has said that the federal government cannot condition the funding of certain programs in a state or in a city on them cooperating with the federal government, if those funds are not related to something if those funds are not related to the program that the federal government is trying to enforce. As an example, the federal government subsidizes things like housing, like housing, like medical services and rehabilitation programs and other kind of social programs within cities, right? So the federal government cannot say, we are not going to fund your Section 8 housing because you have failed to cooperate with us in immigration. That one is very difficult. But there's one key thing that the government can probably do. The Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, cooperates with certain law enforcement agencies in the states and in cities. So the federal government, through the Department of Justice, can say, if you are not going to cooperate with us to identify the following people who come into your custody, then we shall not participate, or we shall limit the funding of your law enforcement agencies. Now you see, immigration law and law enforcement, they are related. So it's possible to use the Department of Justice to limit funding of law enforcement activities in a state. So that is a loophole that can be used. But he cannot generally say that, okay, the federal government will not will not subsidize housing in Chicago because Chicago has failed to cooperate with the federal government in immigration enforcement.
Speak briefly about the deferred action against young people who came here early, because there's a lot of anxiety within that community, especially amongst Kenyans. Young people don't know what's going to happen to them next year. Their parents are also on the ropes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. One thing you need to realize is that deferred action for childhood arrivals is called DACA. It's commonly known as DACA. That was an executive order by the president. An executive order is not a law that is passed by Congress. So the president has some authority to sign some executive orders for basically administrative purposes. So if the next president comes in and does not agree with those executive orders, he can use, by the stroke of a pen, he can do away with all of them. Okay? Technically, he can do that. So that is one thing he can do. Now, is he going to do it or is he not going to do it? That's a question. And as I said, there is no telling what President Trump is going to do about that. Because right now we have very many, I'm told upwards of, for example, we have about 120,000 Kenyans living in the United States now, according to the Migration Policy Institute report of June 2015. So out of those, out of the 120,000 Kenyans living in the United States now, I don't know how many of them are beneficiaries of this deferred action, but they could be, maybe I would assume we could have probably like 5,000 or 6,000 Kenyans, something like that. There are not very many, but it is possible. Now, let's look at where DACA stands right now. Those who already have DACA up to probably somewhere next year, let's say 2017, those who already have DACA right now, I don't see it being taken away. Like, I don't see the federal government signing some orders that, canceling those. Okay? Those who are renewing right now, who are just renewing their DACA right now, they can submit them because it is the DACA program is still in place. They can go ahead and submit them. Now, what I don't know is what will happen when these ones expire and they need to be renewed.
Because they're supposed to be renewed every year.
Yes, every 2 years. Okay? They're supposed to be renewed. Now, if they are not, if they expire and the president does not sign an order extending those benefits or keeping the program alive, then obviously there's the risk that these children will lose their DACA benefits. Okay? And on that point, you know that the President Obama tried to expand DACA to include the parents of those children. It was called DAPA. Now, you know that that case has been stuck in court. The district court out in Texas blocked that, and then we had the Court of Appeals and the Fifth Circuit block it. It went to the Supreme Court. Excuse me. It went to the Supreme Court, and when the case got to the Supreme Court, there was a tie. I mean, you know, the Supreme Court is short-handed right now. We don't have. If you have a 4-4 decision for and against, that means the lower court's decision stands. So it was blocked. So now the whole program is at risk. That's all I would say. Okay, so people need to be looking for other ways of trying to regularize their stay. This time, we are talking about statutory benefits, you know, statutory methods of regularizing their stay, instead of relying on executive orders. So because now, you know, when it comes to statutory benefits, those ones don't rely on the president. They were passed by Congress. Those are laws that are existing, and the president can do nothing about those. So that is where people should direct themselves, so that they don't try to hang their hopes on executive orders. They should go find attorneys who are qualified and who know how to navigate the Immigration and Nationality Act and other immigration statutes that are in existence, and find themselves a benefit that they can qualify for that does not depend on what the president says or what the president thinks.
In your view, what has the whole thing about the election of Trump and his talk about immigration, what effect is that likely going to have on the foreign students, among them Kenyans?
How Trump's administration will handle student visas is something that I cannot guess. I do not know. But as things stand right now, students continue getting their visas and coming here. What I heard Donald Trump say is that he was going to make inspection more intrusive. He was going to make it more aggressive. He's going to make visa issuance a little more, going to require a few more records and things like that. But we haven't seen anything at all. Now, one thing we should always remember is that for anything that this Congress does, it requires funding. The president cannot do anything without funding from Congress. Now, if you look at today's Congress, it has so many priorities. I doubt if student visas is very high on the priority list of what this government is going to do.
Very lastly, Matemu, for those Kenyans living here in the US who have issues with papers, in the immediate term, what's your advice to them? What should they do?
A lot of people are here and they don't know that they have a lot of options, but all they rely on is the word on the street. What your friends and neighbors and family tell you is not the same as what you can be advised by a qualified immigration attorney who knows what they are doing. But there are a few things that everybody needs to do. You need to prepare for that bad day, because if you're here unlawfully, there are some things you cannot control, even if you're trying to follow the law. You can, God forbid, be involved in an accident, and the police show up. During all that, you know, all those discussions and investigations, it turns out, oh, you know, by the way, what is your legal status? The police are not supposed to ask you, no. But if you end up being arrested for some reason by bad luck and you end up in jail, then your immigration status might become an issue if there's some kind of, there's an existing cooperation between this, you know, the state and, you know, or the city and the federal government. So you should always be prepared. What you need to do, first of all, make yourself a good citizen, except for the part that you are here unlawfully. For example, if you are working, make sure you do your taxes all the time and you keep copies of your tax returns. You are involved in your community in terms of volunteering for things, for schools, sports, what your community does. You need to enmesh yourself with the community such that if we need witnesses to come out and say that you're a good man in court, we are not going to have a problem with that. You should have your papers in order. Your passport must stay valid. You should keep your immigration papers like the I-94, the cards that you got, the visas that you received, your birth certificate, all your passports, your employment documents, the bills, your bills in your house, your lease. You should have copies of all these documents. One, to prove that you have a permanent job. Keep birth certificates of your children and other members of your family that have status. Make sure that you don't involve yourself in criminal activities. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Don't drink and drive, because drinking and driving has been the cause of a lot of deportations of Kenyans, or domestic violence. Kenyans end up in immigration proceedings mainly for those two reasons: drinking and driving, or domestic violence that sometimes is related to the drinking. Kenyans are known to drink a lot. Kenyans have a reputation for that here in the United States, and I mean, it's a little sad, but that is it. And that's how they get into a lot of trouble, because this is not Kenya. The moment you drink and drive, you're going to jail. There's nobody to bribe or anything like that. Now, you need to have all your papers to prove where you stay, who your family is, that you pay your taxes, you have your bills, you participate in your community activities, you are involved, and anything you can do to make yourself a good member of your community, do that. And then make sure these papers are always, and a good copy, make sure you have a good copy of all those papers with somebody else, not yourself. Because a lot of times when the immigration come to arrest you, they'll take your passport, they'll take some documents from you. Now, your lawyer needs those documents to be able to apply for immigration bond, some process, and those things need to happen very quickly. You need all those documents to get immigration bond, to file some defenses, to removal proceedings, ask for some kind of benefits, and all these kind of things. So if you are in custody and nobody knows where any of your documents are, a lot of things can happen very fast, and you find yourself without a defense. So make sure there's somebody else who has all those documents, and you're well connected to your community, and that's the first thing to do. And you need to go see a lawyer before you are in trouble, and tell your whole story to a qualified immigration attorney, and let that immigration attorney look at all the options that are available to you, and when they suggest an option that's available to you, go for it. Because a lot of times if you have something that you have filed that is pending, immigration, even if they come for you and you tell them, look, I have filed something, it is pending, it is going, they are processing it and things like that, they look at it and say, okay, we don't need to arrest this guy because he has something that he's waiting for, so let's leave him alone. Things like that, okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Matemu, for that wise counsel. So we've been talking to two very, very important Kenyan lawyers based here in the US. We started our discussion with Ms. Naima Said. Naima Said practices law in the state of Maryland. And now we're just finishing this discussion with Mr. Japheth Matemu. Mr. Matemu has a wide range of experience, especially dealing with the federal government. And there's nothing that we want to add. The most important thing, as they've said, is that seek the counsel of a credible immigration attorney. Put your papers in order, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. This has been the View from the Top. My name is Chris Wamalwa, and stay tuned for more other very, very illuminating discussions from here in the diaspora.